The first time I saw him, I was struggling to breathe. Not because of him, not yet, anyway, but because the vintage corset of my waitressing uniform was cinched too tight. A cruel joke from the new manager who thought I needed to fill it out better. I was balancing 3 plates of steaming pasta and a bottle of Barolo that cost more than my monthly rent, navigating through Bella Rosa's crowded Friday night service. I'd taken this second job to cover my sister Lily's medical bills. The insurance had rejected her latest treatment, using some obscure clause in microscopic print. The debt collectors were calling daily now, and the hospital administrator had started giving me those pitying looks that made my stomach knot. That night, the air in the restaurant was thick with the scent of truffle oil, garlic, and money. Old money that perfumed the room like an expensive cologne. Every table was filled with Milan's elite. Politicians laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny, businessmen with hungry eyes that followed the female servers, and women with diamond-encrusted wrists who barely touched their food. I was exhausted. My feet ached in the mandatory 4-inch heels, and my smile felt plastered to my face. No one noticed. No one ever did. I was part of the scenery, existing only to serve and disappear. Then the atmosphere changed. I didn't see him enter, but I felt it. The restaurant's cheerful buzz dampened to a reverent murmur. Heads turned subtly, careful not to stare too openly. Even the manager, who spent the evening barking orders, suddenly straightened his tie and smoothed his hair. "Table 7, he whispered urgently as he passed, his voice tight with stress. "Vittorio Costello, don't mess up." I knew the name, of course. Everyone in Milan did. The Costello family owned half the city, officially on paper, and the other half through whispered arrangements. They were old-school Cosa Nostra, with businesses that had gone legitimate generations ago. But everyone knew where the money came from originally. The rumors about Vittorio himself ranged from terrifying to mythic. He never appeared in photographs, never gave interviews, and supposedly never left a debt unpaid, whether it was owed in currency or blood. As I approached table 7, I kept my eyes down, focusing on not spilling the wine I'd been instructed to bring immediately. I could see only fragments of him at first. A midnight blue suit tailored to perfection, a heavy silver watch that glinted under the soft lighting, strong hands with a single platinum ring on his right index finger. I carefully placed the wine on the table and began to pour. "Good evening, signore. Welcome to... Look at me when you speak." His voice was low, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the ambient noise like a blade. I froze, the wine bottle suspended mid-pour. Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request, but a command that expected immediate compliance. I raised my eyes slowly, meeting his gaze for the first time. Vittorio Costello was nothing like I had imagined. I'd expected someone older, someone with the bloated, satisfied look of excess. Instead, I found myself staring at a man perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp features that seemed carved from marble. His hair was dark as ink, with silver threads at the temples that only heightened his aura of authority. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Gray like storm clouds, watchful and calculating, missing nothing. He wasn't alone. 2 men sat at adjacent tables, appearing to dine separately but unmistakably alert to their surroundings. One continually scanned the restaurant while speaking quietly into his cuff. Security, obviously. A third man stood discreetly by the entrance, his stance casual, but his attention focused. "Your name," Vittorio said, still watching me with that unblinking gaze. "Elena," I replied, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Elena Ricci." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition, but it vanished so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. He nodded once, then gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit." I glanced nervously toward the kitchen, where my other table's orders were waiting. "I'm sorry, signore. I'm working. I can send another server if you prefer." I said sit, Elena Ricci. The way he said my name, like he was testing how it felt on his tongue, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. His expression hadn't changed, but something dangerous had entered his voice. I sat. Behind me, I could see the manager making a distressed gesture, but one look from Vittorio, and he scurried away like a frightened mouse. "Do you know who I am?" Vittorio asked, pouring a second glass of wine and pushing it toward me. Yes, I answered honestly. There was no point in pretending otherwise. And does that frighten you? I considered lying, but something told me he would know. Yes, I admitted, but I imagine that's how you prefer it. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Most people wouldn't dare say that to my face. I'm too tired to be clever, signore. This time, the smile reached his eyes, transforming his face for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. He studied me with renewed interest, as though I were a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. You work 2 jobs, he stated rather than asked. When I couldn't hide my surprise, he continued, Your hands. You have calluses from typing, yet you're here serving tables. The dark circles under your eyes suggest you're getting perhaps 4 hours of sleep. And you've worn the same shoes for at least 3 years, judging by the wear pattern, despite them being a size too small. I felt exposed, stripped bare by his observations. Are you always this attentive to the waitstaff, Signore Costello? Only when they intrigue me. He took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving mine. Why does Elena Ricci work herself to exhaustion? I shouldn't have told him. I should have made an excuse, slipped away, and continued with my anonymous existence. But there was something in his gaze that demanded truth, and I was too weary to resist. My sister is sick, I said quietly. The treatments are experimental. Insurance won't cover them. What's wrong with her? A rare form of leukemia. She's 17. He nodded once, processing this information with the same intensity he seemed to apply to everything. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a sleek black card. He placed it on the table between us. Call this number tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. I didn't touch the card. I'm not looking for charity, signore. His expression hardened. Did I offer any? 9 a.m., Elena. Don't be late. He stood abruptly, leaving his wine mostly untouched. One of his security detail immediately appeared at his shoulder. Bring her file, he murmured to the man, who nodded once. As Vittorio turned to leave, he paused, looking back at me with those storm cloud eyes. You won't be returning to work here. It wasn't a suggestion. Before I could respond, he was gone, moving through the restaurant with the quiet confidence of a predator, people instinctively clearing a path. The manager was at my side instantly, his face flushed with anger. What did you say to him? Do you have any idea? He told me I won't be coming back to work, I said, still staring at the black card on the table. The manager's face drained of color. Then you won't, he said simply, as though Vittorio Costello's word was law. Which, I was beginning to realize, it probably was. That night, I sat in the tiny apartment I shared with Lily, staring at the card. It contained only a phone number, embossed in silver against the matte black background. No name, no company. Lily was asleep, her thin frame barely making a bump under the covers. The treatments had taken most of her hair, but she insisted on maintaining her spirit. I'm going for the alien chic look, she'd joke, tying colorful scarves around her head. Even now, a bright blue one contrasted sharply with her pallor. I fingered the card, torn between fear and desperate hope. Whatever Vittorio Costello wanted from me, it couldn't be good. Men like him didn't notice women like me unless they wanted something. But if there was even a chance he could help Lily... I set my alarm for 8:30 a.m. The call lasted exactly 27 seconds. A woman's clipped voice answered, instructed me to be at an address in the city's financial district at 10 a.m., and hung up before I could ask questions. No name was requested. They were expecting me. The building was all glass and steel, soaring above its neighbors with the arrogance of obscene wealth. The security desk already had my name. I was directed to the private elevator that went directly to the top floor. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall and barely recognized myself. I'd worn my best outfit, a simple navy blue dress that had once been for interviews, but now served as my good clothes for any important occasion. My dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and I'd applied minimal makeup to hide my exhaustion. I looked respectable, but hopelessly out of place in this temple of power. The elevator opened directly into a vast office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Milan, making the city look like a toy model spread out below. The space was sparsely furnished, but with pieces that screamed quality. An antique desk that had probably witnessed centuries of history, leather chairs soft as butter, and a single painting on the wall that I recognized with shock as an original Caravaggio. Vittorio stood with his back to me, gazing out over the city. He didn't turn when I entered, but I knew he was aware of my presence. "You're 3 minutes early," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "I appreciate punctuality. The metro was running on time for once," I replied, clutching my small handbag like a shield. He turned then, and I was struck again by his presence. Today, he wore a charcoal gray suit that fit him like armor. His security detail was less visible but undoubtedly present. I'd noticed 2 men watching me in the lobby, and another had ridden up in a separate elevator. "Do you know why you're here, Elena?" I shook my head, finding my voice had momentarily abandoned me. He gestured to one of the chairs across from his desk. "Please." I sat, perched on the edge like a sparrow ready to take flight at the first sign of danger. Vittorio took his own seat, folding his hands on the desk. On its polished surface lay a folder. He pushed it toward me. "Your sister's medical file. I had my people retrieve it this morning." My hand froze halfway to the folder. That's confidential. How did you... There's very little that's inaccessible to me." He stated this as a simple fact, without pride or boasting. "Open it." With trembling fingers, I flipped open the cover. Inside were all of Lily's records, her diagnosis, treatment plans, prognosis, and paperwork I'd never seen before. Approvals for experimental treatments, transfer requests to a specialized clinic in Switzerland, and a payment confirmation for an amount that made my head spin. "I don't understand," I whispered, looking up at him. "Your sister will receive the best care available. The Swiss clinic specializes in her particular form of leukemia. Their success rate is 78%, the highest in Europe." He spoke as though arranging multi-million euro medical treatments was as routine as ordering coffee. "She leaves tomorrow. All arrangements have been made." I stared at him, waiting for the catch, the dark underbelly of this miraculous offer. "Why would you do this? You don't know us." Vittorio's expression remained impassive, but something shifted in those storm-gray eyes. "I have my reasons." He opened a drawer and withdrew another folder, this one much thinner. "This is my offer to you." My heart sank. Here it was. The price. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Marriage." The word hung in the air between us, absurd and impossible. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound that died as soon as I saw his expression hadn't changed. "You can't be serious. I am rarely anything but serious, Elena." I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You don't know me. I don't know you. Why would you—" "Sit down," he said quietly. And despite my panic, I found myself obeying. "The arrangement is simple. You will become my wife in name and public appearance. You will live in my home. You will attend functions as required. In return, your sister receives the treatment that will save her life, and you receive financial security." "And what else?" I pressed, knowing there had to be more. Men like him didn't marry women like me for companionship. His gaze was steady. "Nothing you're unwilling to give." I closed my eyes, trying to think through the fog of shock. This is blackmail." "No," he countered calmly. "Blackmail requires a threat. I'm offering a choice. You are free to walk away." But I wasn't. Not really. Not with Lily's life hanging in the balance. "Why me?" I asked, opening my eyes to search his face for answers. "There are countless women who would gladly marry Vittorio Costello. Beautiful women, connected women, women who would bring something to this arrangement." For the first time, something like genuine emotion crossed his features. A flash of what might have been pain, quickly masked. "You have something they don't," he said simply. "And what's that?" His eyes held mine. "You have nothing to lose." The truth of his words hit me like a physical blow. He was right. I had nothing except Lily, and he was offering to save her. What choice did I really have? "When?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Today. My lawyers have the paperwork ready." "Today?" I echoed in disbelief. Elena, he interrupted, his voice softening marginally. I understand this is sudden, but your sister's treatment begins tomorrow, and for that to happen, certain legal matters must be in place. I stared down at my hands, noticing distantly how they trembled. And if I say no, then you leave here with my best wishes and return to your life as it was. His tone was neutral, but I heard the underlying message. Return to watching my sister die slowly while I worked myself to exhaustion trying to save her. I looked up at him, this stranger who held my sister's life in his hands. Why do I feel like I've just made a deal with the devil? Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. Perhaps you have. He stood, buttoning his jacket with a practiced motion. But even the devil keeps his promises, Elena. As he led me from the office toward whatever future I had just agreed to, I couldn't shake the feeling I had made a catastrophic mistake. Yet for Lily, I would walk into hell itself with my eyes open. I just hadn't realized hell would be dressed in a perfect suit, with storm-gray eyes that seemed to see right through me. The wedding, if you could call it that, was a cold, sterile affair conducted in Vittorio's office later that same day. No white dress, no flowers, no family, just a judge who seemed entirely unsurprised to be performing such a ceremony, and 2 of Vittorio's men serving as witnesses. I signed the papers with a hand that wouldn't stop trembling, watching as my signature transformed me into Elena Costello. My new husband didn't kiss me. He merely nodded once the judge pronounced us married, then gestured for his assistant to handle the remaining details while he took a phone call in the corner of the room. I stood alone, a bride without a celebration, wondering what I had just done. Mrs. Costello, the title, spoken by a stern-looking woman I hadn't noticed before, jolted me from my thoughts. I'm Francesca, Mr. Costello's head of household staff. I'll be taking you to the estate and showing you your accommodations. I followed her in a daze, barely registering the sleek black car that waited for us, the driver who opened the door without making eye contact, or the city streets blurring past the tinted windows. Vittorio didn't accompany us. He had matters to attend to, Francesca explained without elaboration, as though it were perfectly normal for a groom to abandon his bride minutes after the ceremony. Your sister has already been transferred to the private hospital wing at the estate, Francesca informed me as we drove. She'll be stabilized there before flying to Switzerland tomorrow. Mr. Costello thought you might want to see her settled. At the mention of Lily, my fog lifted slightly. She's at the estate? Now? Does she know what's happened? She knows she's receiving specialized treatment arranged by Mr. Costello. The details of the arrangement have been left for you to explain as you see fit. I nodded, grateful for this small mercy at least. How would I explain to my vibrant, idealistic sister that I had essentially sold myself to save her life? The estate, as Francesca called it, turned out to be a sprawling villa nestled in the hills outside Milan. As we passed through imposing iron gates that closed silently behind us, I caught my first glimpse of my new home, a massive stone structure that looked like it had stood for centuries, surrounded by immaculately manicured gardens, and protected by an unobtrusive but undeniable security presence. Men in dark suits patrolled the grounds, and I noticed cameras disguised among the ivy and statuary. The east wing has been prepared for you, Francesca said as we pulled up to the main entrance. Mr. Costello occupies the west wing. The central areas are shared spaces for entertaining and daily activities. The message was clear. We would be living separate lives under one roof. The interior of the villa was a study in understated luxury. Priceless antiques mingling with modern pieces, marble floors, soaring ceilings, and art that belonged in museums rather than private homes. Francesca led me through a maze of corridors until we reached what she called my suite, which turned out to be larger than the entire apartment Lily and I had shared. Your belongings have been collected and will be delivered shortly, she informed me. Mr. Costello has arranged for a new wardrobe appropriate to your position. The stylist will arrive tomorrow for measurements. I sank onto a velvet chaise, suddenly overwhelmed by the unreality of it all. When can I see my sister? She's resting now. The doctor suggests you visit in an hour. I'll have someone escort you then. Francesca paused at the door. Dinner is at 8 in the small dining room. Mr. Costello expects you to join him. With that, she left me alone in my gilded cage. The suite contained a bedroom with a bed large enough for 4 people, a sitting room where I currently sat, a dressing room lined with empty closets awaiting their new contents, and a bathroom with a tub that resembled a small swimming pool. Everything was decorated in shades of blue and silver, elegant, expensive, and utterly impersonal. I walked to the windows, which overlooked a section of the gardens, and beyond them, the rolling Lombardy countryside. The glass was bulletproof, I realized as I touched it, thicker than normal, with a subtle reinforcement visible at the edges. What kind of life necessitated bulletproof windows in your home? A life I had just married into. Exactly 58 minutes later, a soft knock at the door announced my escort, a young man named Marco, who explained he was part of the household security team. He led me through another series of corridors to what appeared to be a self-contained medical facility within the villa. Lily was awake when I entered, propped up on pillows and looking better than she had in weeks. The room resembled a luxury hotel suite more than a hospital room, but the medical equipment discreetly positioned around the bed betrayed its true purpose. Elena. Her face lit up when she saw me. Can you believe this? It's like we won the lottery without buying a ticket. I forced a smile, sitting carefully on the edge of her bed. How are you feeling? Better already. They gave me something that's taken the pain away, and the doctor says my numbers are already improving. She gestured around the room. And look at this place. It's insane. The nurse said we're flying to Switzerland tomorrow on a private jet. A private jet, Elena. Her excitement faded as she studied my face. What's wrong? You look weird. I took her hand, trying to find the words. Lily, do you know who's paying for all this? She nodded. Some rich guy you work for? The one from the restaurant? They didn't tell me much, just that you had connections I didn't know about. Her eyes narrowed. What's going on? What aren't you telling me? I couldn't do it. Couldn't tell her the truth, not when she was looking at me with such hope and excitement. It's complicated, I said finally. But yes, it's Vittorio Costello. He's helping us. Out of the goodness of his heart, Lily had always been too perceptive for her own good. Come on, Lena. Nobody does something like this for nothing, especially not men like him. I might be sick, but I'm not stupid. I swallowed hard. We can talk about it after you're better. The important thing now is your treatment. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you did, whatever deal you made, thank you. But I'm worried about you. Don't be, I said, forcing brightness into my voice. Everything's going to be fine now. You're going to get better, and that's all that matters. We spent the next hour together, carefully avoiding the subject of Vittorio and focusing instead on the treatment plan the doctors had outlined. Lily would spend 6 months in Switzerland, receiving a combination of experimental therapies that had shown promising results in cases like hers. I promised to visit as often as possible, not knowing if that was a promise I would be allowed to keep. By the time I left her, exhaustion had caught up with me. Marco escorted me back to my suite, where I found that my few possessions had indeed been delivered, my clothes hanging forlornly in one small corner of the massive closet, looking shabby and out of place like their owner. I showered in the palatial bathroom, wrapped myself in a robe softer than anything I'd ever owned, and lay down on the enormous bed, intending to rest for just a moment before dinner. I awoke to darkness and a soft knocking at my door. Disoriented, I stumbled to open it, finding Francesca looking distinctly disapproving on the other side. Mrs. Costello, you missed dinner. It's nearly 10 o'clock. Horror washed over me. I fell asleep. I'm so sorry. Mr. Costello asks that you join him in his study. Her tone made it clear this was not a request to be declined. Panic seized me. Now? Like this? I gestured to my robe and disheveled appearance. I suggest you dress quickly, was her only response. I threw on the least wrinkled of my old clothes, a simple black dress that had seen better days, and ran a brush through my tangled hair. No time for makeup or proper grooming. I followed Francesca through the silent villa, mentally preparing excuses, apologies, explanations. Vittorio's study was a masculine space dominated by dark wood, leather-bound books, and the scent of expensive cigars. He sat behind a massive desk, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. He didn't look up when I entered. merely gestured to a chair across from him. "I apologize for missing dinner," I said into the silence. "I fell asleep and your sister departs for Switzerland at 6 a.m. He removed his glasses, finally looking at me. "You'll want to see her before she goes." I blinked in surprise. Was that all? No anger at the social slight, no reminder of my obligations. "Yes. Thank you." He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You look exhausted." "It's been an eventful day." Something like amusement flickered in his eyes. "Indeed." He stood, walking to a sideboard where he poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. He offered one to me, which I accepted with slightly shaky hands. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass slightly. I took a small sip, the expensive whiskey burning a path down my throat. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now?" He returned to his seat, leaning back to regard me thoughtfully. "Now you rest. Recover your strength. Your sister will need you to be strong during her treatment. And us? This marriage?" Vittorio swirled the liquid in his glass. "We have an arrangement, Elena. Nothing more, nothing less." "But why?" I pressed, emboldened by exhaustion and the whiskey warming my blood. "Why this charade? Why marriage? If you wanted companionship, there are simpler ways." His expression hardened slightly. "I have my reasons. They are not your concern at present." "Not my concern?" I laughed incredulously. "It's my life. A life you chose," he reminded me, his voice cooling several degrees. "When you accepted my offer." I set down my glass, suddenly afraid I might throw it at him. "Because you gave me no real choice. There is always a choice, Elena. You made yours." He stood again, signaling the end of our conversation. "Rest. We'll speak more once your sister is settled in Switzerland." I rose on unsteady legs, anger and confusion warring within me. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. "Elena." I looked back at him, this stranger who was now my husband. "I keep my promises," he said quietly. "Your sister will have the best care possible. And you." His eyes held mine. "You will be safe here." Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. Safe from what? But he had already returned to his papers, dismissing me as effectively as if he'd shown me the door. I spent the early hours of the next morning with Lily, trying to project confidence and optimism as she prepared for her journey. A medical team would accompany her, including a doctor who specialized in her condition, and 2 nurses who would remain with her throughout the treatment. "I'll call every day," I promised, as they readied her for transport. "And I'll visit as soon as they say you're settled." "You'd better." She squeezed my hand. "And Elena? Figure out what you've gotten yourself into, okay? I want you safe too." I kissed her forehead, fighting back tears. "Don't worry about me. Just focus on getting better." As the medical team wheeled her toward the waiting helicopter, which would take her to the private airfield where Vittorio's jet awaited, I felt a presence beside me. Vittorio stood there, watching the proceedings with his usual inscrutable expression. "She'll be in good hands," he said, not looking at me. "Thank you," I whispered, and meant it, despite everything else. He nodded once, then walked away, leaving me to wave goodbye to my sister as she was lifted into the sky, headed toward hope and healing while I remained behind, bound to a man I didn't know by a contract disguised as marriage. As I watched the helicopter disappear into the dawn sky, I made a silent promise to Lily and to myself. I would discover why Vittorio Costello had chosen me, what he really wanted, and what dangers lurked behind his promise of safety. I just had to survive being his wife long enough to find out. Days passed in a strange, dreamlike routine. I explored the vast estate, getting lost more times than I could count in its labyrinthine corridors and sprawling gardens. I spoke daily with Lily, whose voice grew stronger with each call as the Swiss doctors expressed cautious optimism about her response to the treatment. And I rarely saw my husband. Vittorio left the villa before dawn most days, returning late in the evening, if at all. We occasionally shared silent, awkward dinners in the formal dining room, attended by staff who moved like ghosts around us. He asked polite questions about my comfort and Lily's progress, and I provided equally polite answers. He never touched me, never attempted to claim any husbandly rights, never even entered my wing of the house as far as I knew. It should have been a relief. Instead, it left me increasingly uneasy. 2 weeks after our wedding, Francesca informed me that I would be expected to attend a charity gala that evening, my first public appearance as Mrs. Costello. "Mr. Costello has arranged for appropriate attire," she said, leading me to my dressing room where a garment bag now hung. "The stylist will arrive at 4 to assist with hair and makeup. The car will depart at 7 sharp." Inside the bag was a gown that probably cost more than everything I had ever owned combined, a midnight blue creation of silk and intricate beadwork that seemed to catch every ray of light. Matching shoes, a clutch, and a velvet box containing a diamond necklace and earrings completed the ensemble. I stared at it all in disbelief. "This is excessive." This is appropriate for the wife of Vittorio Costello," Francesca corrected, with the faintest hint of disapproval in her voice. She had made it clear through 1,000 subtle indicators that she found me woefully inadequate for my new position, though she was too professional to say so directly. At precisely 7, I descended the grand staircase, feeling like an imposter in my borrowed finery. My hair had been styled in an elegant updo, my makeup applied with expert hands to highlight features I hadn't known I possessed, and the diamonds at my throat and ears caught the light with every movement. Vittorio waited at the bottom of the stairs, and for a moment as our eyes met, something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. He wore a tuxedo that fit his powerful frame perfectly, the stark black and white emphasizing the intensity of his gray eyes and the sharp planes of his face. "You look lovely," he said, offering his arm with formal courtesy. "Thank you." I placed my hand on his sleeve, feeling the heat of him even through the layers of fabric. It was the closest we had been since our wedding day. A sleek limousine waited outside, with the now familiar security detail in place. 2 cars ahead of us, 2 behind, and men stationed along the route from the front door to the vehicle. Vittorio handed me into the car as though I were made of glass, then sat beside me, maintaining a careful distance. "This event is important," he said as we pulled away from the villa. "Many of Milan's most influential families will be there, including some business associates of mine. They will be curious about you." I turned to face him, suddenly nervous. What should I say? "We haven't discussed what story we're telling people." "The truth," he replied simply. "We met at Bella Rosa. There was an immediate connection. We married quickly because life is uncertain." His lips curved in a mirthless smile. "People will assume you're pregnant, of course." I flushed, but I'm not. "They'll figure that out eventually." He straightened his already perfect cuffs. "You needn't worry about conversation. Stay close to me, smile, be charming, but say little. These people are vipers disguised as peacocks." "And what are you?" I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I glimpsed something dangerous behind them. "I am exactly what they think I am, Elena. Never forget that." The gala was held at one of Milan's oldest and most prestigious hotels, its ballroom transformed into a glittering wonderland of flowers, crystal, and candlelight. As we entered, I felt the subtle shift in the room's energy. Conversations pausing, heads turning, whispers spreading like ripples in water. Vittorio's hand settled at the small of my back, a possessive gesture that was our first real physical contact. "Smile," he murmured close to my ear. "Everyone is watching," and they were. I could feel the weight of curious stares, the assessment of my worth, the speculation about how someone like me had captured the elusive Vittorio Costello. As he guided me through the crowd, people stepped aside, offering greetings that ranged from warmly obsequious to coolly respectful. Vittorio responded to each with perfect composure, introducing me with simple dignity. "My wife, Elena. My wife." The words sounded strange coming from his lips, as though we were actors in a play neither of us had rehearsed properly. The first hour passed in a blur of names and faces I couldn't hope to remember. I smiled until my cheeks ached, accepted congratulations from strangers, and tried to emulate Vittorio's air of calm command. His hand rarely left my back or arm, maintaining constant contact that felt both protective and possessive. "Vittorio, There you are, you elusive bastard. The voice came from a striking woman in her 40s, dressed in a daring red gown that emphasized her still impressive figure. She air-kissed Vittorio's cheeks with familiar ease, then turned assessing eyes on me. So, this is the bride we've all been hearing about. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. Isabella Moretti, an old friend of your husband's family. Elena, I replied, shaking her hand and noting the slight emphasis she'd placed on old friend. Isabella, Vittorio acknowledged with a nod that seemed cooler than his other greetings. I trust you're well. Better now that I've met the woman who accomplished what none of us thought possible. Her smile was razor-sharp, capturing the uncapturable Vittorio Costello. You must tell me your secret, my dear. There's no secret, I said, feeling Vittorio's hand tighten slightly at my waist. Sometimes the heart simply knows what it wants. Isabella laughed, a sound like breaking glass. The heart. How refreshingly romantic. I would have thought it was something far more practical. Her gaze flicked downward, assessing my still flat stomach. You'll have to excuse us, Isabella. Vittorio cut in smoothly. The ambassador is waiting. He steered me away, his expression betraying nothing of his thoughts. Who was that? I whispered once we were out of earshot. Someone who wanted to be where you are, he replied cryptically. One of many, in fact. Before I could press for details, we were approached by an elderly man with shrewd eyes and a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to him. Salvatore, Vittorio greeted the older man with what seemed like genuine respect. Allow me to introduce my wife, Elena. Elena, this is Salvatore Ricci and his son Antonio. I froze at the name. Ricci, my name, my father's name. I looked more closely at the older man, searching for any resemblance to the father I barely remembered, who had disappeared when I was 6 years old. A pleasure to meet the woman who has finally tamed Vittorio, Salvatore said, kissing my hand with old-world courtesy. Ricci, was it? Before your marriage, of course. Any relation to the Riccis of Tuscany? I don't think so, I managed, glancing at Vittorio, whose face revealed nothing. My father died when I was young. I know little of his family. Something passed between Salvatore and Vittorio, a silent communication I couldn't decipher. A shame, Salvatore murmured. Family is everything. Wouldn't you agree, Vittorio? Indeed, my husband replied, his tone giving away nothing of his thoughts. The evening continued in this vein. Cryptic conversations, meaningful glances I couldn't interpret, and the constant, unnerving sensation of being watched and evaluated. By the time we returned to the limousine several hours later, my nerves were frayed to the breaking point. Did you know? I demanded as soon as the car door closed behind us. About Salvatore Ricci? Is he related to me? Vittorio loosened his bow tie with a practiced motion. Why do you ask? Don't play games, I snapped, too tired and overwhelmed to maintain the polite facade. The name, the way you looked at each other. Is that why you chose me? Because of my name? Who is he to you? To me? He studied me for a long moment, his face half hidden in the shadows of the car. Salvatore was once a business associate of your father's, he finally said. A long time ago. My heart pounded against my ribs. You knew my father? I knew of him. Vittorio's voice was carefully neutral. He was before my time, but his reputation persisted. What reputation? What business? My mother always said he was a construction worker who died in an accident. Vittorio's laugh was short and without humor. Is that what she told you? He shook his head slightly. Your mother protected you as best she could, Elena. Some truths are better left buried. Not for me, I insisted, grabbing his arm without thinking. If you know something about my father, I have a right to know too. His eyes dropped to my hand on his sleeve, and I quickly withdrew it, suddenly aware of my boldness. But the brief contact seemed to make a decision for him. Marco Ricci was not a construction worker, he said quietly. He worked for my father, as Salvatore did. They were business partners of a sort. The implication hung in the air between us. My father had been connected to the Costello family business, to the Cosa Nostra. The room seemed to spin slightly around me. That's why you chose me, I whispered, pieces falling into place. Because of who my father was, but why? He's been dead for 20 years, the debts of the father, Vittorio said cryptically. Sometimes fall to the children, sometimes. So do the rewards. What does that mean? I demanded, frustration mounting. Stop speaking in riddles. The car pulled up to the villa before he could answer. As always, security moved into position, checking the surroundings before opening our door. Vittorio exited first, then offered me his hand. I almost refused it, tempted to stay in the car until he gave me real answers. But the driver was watching, and the security team, and I had already learned that in this world, appearances mattered above all else. I took his hand and allowed him to help me from the car, the diamonds at my throat suddenly feeling like a collar. We walked in silence to the grand entrance, where Francesca waited to take my wrap and clutch. Once we were alone in the vast foyer, I turned to face him again. I deserve the truth, I said quietly but firmly, whatever it is. Vittorio regarded me with those storm-gray eyes that gave away nothing of his thoughts. The truth, he repeated, as though testing the word. The truth is rarely simple, Elena, and never painless. I'm stronger than you think. Something like respect flickered in his expression. Yes, he agreed. I believe you are. Which is why I will tell you this much tonight. Your father made choices that put both you and your sister in danger. Danger you never knew existed because others protected you from it. What danger? Who protected us? I did. The simple statement hung in the air between us. For the past 15 years, I have ensured that the shadows of your father's choices never touched you or Lily, but circumstances have changed. Keeping you safe from a distance was no longer possible. I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. So this marriage, it's what? Some kind of elaborate protection program? His lips curved slightly, in a manner of speaking. From what? Who would want to hurt us after all this time? That, he said, is a conversation for another day. You're exhausted, and these are waters too deep to wade into tonight. He was right. I was swaying slightly on my feet, the combination of emotional shock and physical fatigue taking its toll. But I couldn't let it go entirely. Promise me, I said, meeting his gaze directly. Promise you'll tell me everything, soon. Vittorio studied me for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. You have my word. He gestured toward the grand staircase. Rest now. We'll speak tomorrow. As I climbed the stairs, I felt his eyes on me, watching until I disappeared from view. In my suite, I carefully removed the diamonds and the beautiful gown, placing them in the dressing room like the costumes they were. I showered away the makeup and perfume, returning to myself, or the self I had been before I became Elena Costello. But as I slipped between the silk sheets of my too large bed, I realized that self was gone forever. Whoever I had been before, the simple girl working 2 jobs, caring for her sister, believing in her construction worker father's accidental death, that person no longer existed. In her place was a woman married to a dangerous man, wearing borrowed finery, living in a house with bulletproof glass, and carrying a name that apparently came with shadows and debts I didn't understand. I fell asleep wondering which was the bigger lie, the life I had lived before or the one I was living now. Morning brought clarity and determination. I dressed in one of the simpler outfits from my new wardrobe, tailored black pants and a cream silk blouse, and went in search of my husband. Francesca intercepted me in the main hall. Mr. Costello left for Milan at dawn, she informed me with her usual efficiency. He asked that you join him for dinner at 8. The car will take you to the restaurant. Did he leave a number where I can reach him? I asked, undeterred. It's important, Mr. Costello does not appreciate being disturbed during business hours. Her tone suggested I was being unreasonable. If there's an emergency, you may speak with Marco. I bit back my frustration. It's about my sister. This was a slight manipulation. Lily was doing well according to our morning call. But I had quickly learned that Vittorio's staff would move mountains where my sister's care was concerned. Francesca's expression softened marginally. I'll see if he's available. She disappeared into a nearby office, returning moments later with a slight frown. Mr. Costello is in meetings until 3. He'll call you then. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than nothing. Thank you, Francesca. With hours to fill, I decided to do some investigating of my own. The villa was enormous, and while I had explored much of it over the past weeks, there were areas I knew were restricted. Vittorio's private wing, certain offices, and a section of the basement I had noticed but never ventured into. Today, I would start with a less forbidden territory: the library. If my father had indeed been connected to the Costello family, perhaps there would be records, photographs, some trace of him in the family archives. The library was my favorite room in the villa. 3 stories of floor-to-ceiling bookshelves accessible by rolling ladders, comfortable leather chairs, and windows that filled the space with natural light. It smelled of paper, leather, and wood polish, a scent I found immensely comforting. I began with the most obvious: family albums displayed on the lower shelves. They chronicled the Costello dynasty through generations: stern patriarchs, elegant wives, solemn children growing into powerful adults. I recognized Vittorio's father from news articles I had researched online. Giuseppe Costello had been a prominent businessman with rumored Mafia connections that were never proven in court. In photographs from the 1990s, I spotted a younger Salvatore Ricci standing beside Giuseppe at various social functions. And then, in an image that made my heart stop, I saw him. My father. I recognized him instantly, though he looked nothing like the faded photographs my mother had kept. In those, he had been smiling, casual, dressed in simple clothes with my mother at his side. In this image, he stood between Giuseppe Costello and Salvatore Ricci at some formal event, wearing an expensive suit, his expression serious and watchful. The caption beneath read, Giuseppe, Marco, and Salvatore. Milano, 1995. 2 years before his supposed death. I stared at the photograph, trying to reconcile this elegant, dangerous-looking man with the father I barely remembered. The one who had swung me onto his shoulders and called me his little princess. I see you've been busy. I startled, nearly dropping the album. Vittorio stood in the library doorway, watching me with an unreadable expression. You said you'd call at 3, I said, my voice unsteady. My meetings concluded early. He crossed the room with his usual fluid grace, stopping beside me to look down at the open album. You found him. He doesn't look like I remember. I traced my father's face through the protective plastic. My mother kept photos of a different man. Your mother wanted to remember the man she fell in love with, not the man he became. Vittorio gently took the album from my hands, closing it and returning it to its shelf. Come, we should talk somewhere more comfortable. He led me to his study, a room I had only entered once before. This time, I noticed details I had missed. Photographs on the desk of a woman who resembled him, certificates and awards on the walls, a glass case containing antique weapons. It was still an intimidating space, but more personal than I had initially perceived. Vittorio gestured for me to sit, then poured us each a drink, whiskey again, though I hadn't asked for it. He settled into the chair behind his desk, swirling the amber liquid thoughtfully before speaking. Your father worked for mine, he began without preamble. He started as security, but he was smart, ambitious. My father recognized his potential and promoted him, made him part of the inner circle along with Salvatore and a few others. What exactly did my father do? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect the answer. Vittorio met my gaze directly. He collected debts. He enforced rules. He protected our family's interests. He was a criminal, I said flatly. He was a man making a living the best way he knew how, Vittorio countered. The line between criminal and businessman has always been blurry in certain circles, Elena. My family operated on both sides of that line. And now? His lips curved slightly. Now we are respectable businessmen, of course. I didn't believe him, but I had more pressing questions. You said he made choices that put Lily and me in danger. What choices? Vittorio's expression darkened. Your father was ambitious to a fault. He wanted more than my father was willing to give. So he made arrangements with a rival family, the Morettis. Isabella Moretti, I said, remembering the woman from the gala. Her husband. Dante, actually. Isabella was just the trophy wife, though she's proven quite resourceful since his death. He took a sip of his whiskey. Your father began selling information to Dante. Small things at first, then larger secrets. When my father discovered the betrayal, he gave Marco a choice: disappear forever, or watch his family pay the price of his treason. My hands trembled around my glass. So he chose to disappear. He chose to protect you, Vittorio corrected gently. My father was not a forgiving man, but he respected family loyalty. He allowed your father to stage his death, to ensure you and your mother would be safe from retribution. In exchange, Marco would never contact you again, and would leave Italy permanently. Did he? Leave Italy? He went to America, started a new life there under a new name. The room seemed to tilt around me. He's alive? Vittorio hesitated, then shook his head. He died 10 years ago. Cancer. By then, my father had also passed, and I had taken over the family business. I closed my eyes, absorbing the shock of this revelation. My father hadn't died when I was 6. He had abandoned us, chosen exile over facing the consequences of his actions. He had lived for another decade while my mother struggled to raise 2 daughters alone, while I took on adult responsibilities as a child to help her. Why didn't you tell me this when we met? I demanded, anger replacing shock. Why the elaborate charade of marriage? If you've been protecting us all these years, why change the arrangement now? Vittorio set down his glass, his expression grave, because Dante Moretti's son, Angelo, recently discovered your existence. He believes incorrectly that your father left something valuable behind. Information, accounts, evidence that could damage their family. He's been looking for you and Lily. Cold fear replaced my anger. Is that why Lily got sick? Did they— No, Vittorio said quickly. Her illness is tragic but natural. But when she began receiving specialized treatment, it created electronic records, hospital visits, a trail that Angelo's people were able to follow. They found your apartment 2 days before I approached you at the restaurant. So you what? Decided to marry me to keep me under lock and key? I decided to marry you because it was the most effective way to place you under my protection, he corrected. The Costello name still carries weight in Milan. Few would dare touch my wife. But Lily is safer in Switzerland, receiving treatment that may save her life, surrounded by security that reports directly to me. I stood abruptly, too agitated to remain seated. This is insane. All of it. I'm not part of this world. I'm a nobody. A waitress, a temp worker. I've never done anything to Angelo Moretti or his family. You exist, Vittorio said simply. Sometimes that's enough. I paced the length of his study, trying to process everything he'd told me. So, what happens now? Do we stay married forever? Do I live the rest of my life as a Mafia princess, hiding behind your name and your security team? Until Angelo is no longer a threat, yes. And when will that be? Something dangerous flashed in Vittorio's eyes. Soon, if I have my way. The implication was clear, and it should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of security knowing that this man, this powerful, dangerous man, was determined to eliminate any threat to me and my sister. Why do you care? I asked, stopping my pacing to look directly at him. Why go to all this trouble for the daughters of a man who betrayed your family? What do you get out of this arrangement? Vittorio rose from his chair, moving around the desk to stand before me. This close, I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, and feel the heat radiating from his body. Your father made mistakes, he said quietly, but before that he saved my life. Twice. I was 15 the first time, caught in a situation I shouldn't have been in. Marco pulled me out, took a bullet in the process. He gestured to his shoulder. The second time, I was 20, and he intercepted information about a planned hit. He warned me, against his own interests with the Morettis. So this is about repaying a debt, I said, some of my tension easing. That, at least, made sense to me. Partly, he acknowledged. But also, he hesitated. Something I'd never seen him do before. There are things you don't know about me, Elena. Reasons why marriage to someone like you serves purposes beyond your protection. Someone like me? Someone real, unconnected. Someone who sees me as Vittorio, not as a Costello. For the first time, I glimpsed vulnerability beneath his controlled exterior. This powerful, feared man was also, in some ways, as trapped as I was, imprisoned by his name, his position, the expectations of the world he inhabited. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it with a frown, then looked back at me. "We'll have to continue this later. There's a situation that requires my attention." "Of course," I said, suddenly exhausted by the weight of revelations. "Your business." He hesitated, then reached out to touch my face, the first time he had done so with gentleness rather than calculated public display. "This isn't how I wanted to tell you. Is any of it real?" I asked, unable to help myself. "This marriage, your protection, your interest in me?" His expression softened marginally. "More real than you know." With that cryptic response, he was gone, leaving me alone with shattered illusions about my father, new fears for my sister, and confusing feelings about the man I had married for survival, but was beginning to see as something more complex than the monster I had initially believed him to be. That night, he didn't come home at all. 3 days passed with no word from Vittorio. Francesca assured me this was normal. Mr. Costello often has business that takes him away, but I noticed the increased security presence around the villa, the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the tense vigilance of the guards patrolling the grounds. Something was wrong. On the 4th morning, I was speaking with Lily via video call when the connection suddenly dropped. I tried calling back immediately, but the call wouldn't go through. Panic rising, I rushed to find Marco, who had become my most reliable source of information in Vittorio's absence. I found him in the security room, surrounded by monitors showing different areas of the estate. He was speaking rapidly into a phone, his usual calm demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "Marco," I interrupted, fear making me bold. "I can't reach Lily. The call dropped, and now I can't get through." He looked up, his expression grim. "Mrs. Costello, please wait in your suite. I'll come find you shortly." "No," I said firmly. "Tell me what's happening. Now." He hesitated, then covered the phone's microphone. "There's been an incident at the clinic in Switzerland. Your sister is safe, but we're moving her to a more secure location." "What kind of incident?" My voice rose. "What happened?" Marco glanced at the other security personnel, then guided me to a private office adjacent to the security room. Once the door closed behind us, he spoke quietly but directly. "2 men attempted to access the medical wing where your sister is being treated. They were intercepted by our security team. There was an alteration. The men were neutralized." "Neutralized," I repeated numbly. "They're dead." Marco didn't deny it. "Your sister never saw anything. She's being moved as a precaution." "I want to go to her," I insisted. "Wherever you're taking her, I need to be there." "That's not possible right now," he said, his tone softening slightly. "Mr. Costello's orders are to keep you here, where we can ensure your safety." "Where is he? Why hasn't he called me?" Marco hesitated again. "Mr. Costello is handling the situation personally." The way he said it sent a chill through me. I knew enough now about this world to understand what handling personally likely entailed. "Angelo Moretti," I guessed. "He sent those men after Lily." Marco neither confirmed nor denied it, but his expression told me I was right. "When will Vittorio return?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Soon," Marco replied, though I could tell he wasn't certain. "In the meantime, please stay within the villa. We've doubled security, but it would be safest if you remained inside." I nodded, too numb to argue further. Back in my suite, I paced restlessly, checking my phone every few minutes for any word from Lily or Vittorio. Hours passed in agonizing silence. As night fell, I stood at my window, watching the security teams patrolling the gardens with greater frequency than usual. The villa felt like a fortress under siege, though no enemy was visible beyond the gates. A soft knock at my door startled me. I opened it to find Francesca, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, her expression grave. "Mrs. Costello," she said quietly, "please come with me." "What's happened?" I demanded, fear clutching at my throat. "Is it Lily? Vittorio?" "Mr. Costello has returned," she said, avoiding my eyes. "He's in the East Wing medical suite." "Medical suite," The words echoed in my mind as I followed her through the corridors at a near run. Vittorio was hurt. The realization sent an unexpected wave of dread through me. Despite everything, the arranged marriage, the secrets, the dangerous world he had pulled me into, the thought of him injured or worse filled me with a fear I hadn't anticipated. The medical suite was a flurry of activity, doctors and nurses moving efficiently around a central bed where Vittorio lay, his normally imposing figure looking somehow smaller against the white sheets. His face was bruised, a cut above his eye had been freshly stitched, and bandages wrapped his torso. When he saw me in the doorway, he dismissed the medical staff with a curt nod. They filed out silently, leaving us alone. "You should see the other guy," he said, his voice hoarse but his attempt at humor unmistakable. I approached the bed slowly, studying his injuries. "Is there another guy to see?" A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. Not anymore. I should have been horrified, but all I felt was relief. Relief that he was alive, that he was here, that whatever threat had loomed over us might finally be gone. "Angelo?" I asked quietly. Vittorio nodded once. "He won't trouble you or Lily again." I sank into the chair beside his bed, suddenly exhausted. "Lily is safe," he assured me. "I spoke with her doctor an hour ago. She's responding well to the treatment, and her new accommodations are even more comfortable than the last." "They tried to take her," I said, the reality of how close we'd come to disaster finally hitting me. "If your men hadn't been there." "But they were," Vittorio said firmly, reaching for my hand. His grip was weaker than usual, but still reassuringly solid. "I promise to keep you both safe, Elena. I keep my promises." I looked down at our joined hands. His knuckles were scraped and bruised, evidence of violence I couldn't bring myself to ask about. This man had killed for me, for my sister. The thought should have repulsed me, but instead, I felt a complex mix of gratitude, fear, and something deeper I wasn't ready to name. "Why didn't you take me with you?" I asked. "When you left? Why keep me in the dark?" He studied me for a long moment. "Because I wanted to keep that darkness away from you for as long as possible. Because once you see certain things, you can't unsee them." "I'm stronger than you think," I said, echoing my words from days before. "I know exactly how strong you are," he replied. "It's one of the things I admire most about you." The admission hung in the air between us, sincere in a way our previous interactions had not been. Something had changed. Whether through his brush with death or my growing understanding of his world, the walls between us had begun to crumble. "What happens now?" I asked, still holding his hand. "Now we heal," he said simply. "All of us. Lily continues her treatment, which is showing remarkable progress. I recover from these minor inconveniences." He gestured to his injuries with a dismissive air that made me suspect they were more serious than he was admitting. "And you? What about me?" His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once seemed so cold, softened as they held mine. "You decide what you want, Elena. The threat is eliminated. Our arrangement has served its purpose. If you wish to end it, arrangements can be made." "You'd let me go?" I asked, surprised by the offer. "Just like that?" "There would be conditions," he admitted. "Financial support for you and Lily, continued security, though less intrusive. A residence of your choosing." "But the marriage could be annulled or dissolved, if that's what you want." I should have felt relieved. This was my chance at freedom, at returning to something resembling a normal life. Yet the prospect filled me with unexpected emptiness. "And if that's not what I want?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Vittorio's expression changed subtly, hope flickering behind his careful control. "Then we begin again," he said. "Not as a business arrangement, not as protector and protected, but as two people choosing each other with open eyes." "You would want that? With me?" He brought my hand to his lips, the gesture achingly gentle from a man I had once thought incapable of tenderness. "Elena," he said quietly, "I have watched over you since you were 12 years old. I saw you grow into a woman of extraordinary strength and compassion. I witnessed how you sacrificed everything for your sister without hesitation or resentment when the time came to bring you into my world. I chose marriage not just because it was the most effective protection, but because I had already begun to care for you in ways I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge. You never touched me, I said, the observation slipping out before I could stop it. Because I wanted you to come to me willingly or not at all, he replied simply. I would not take what wasn't freely given, especially from someone who felt indebted to me. The honesty in his voice, the vulnerability in his usually guarded expression, they undid something inside me. The man before me was not just the dangerous Mafia boss or the calculating protector. He was simply Vittorio, a man who had carried the weight of his family's legacy while trying to forge something better, something real. I leaned forward, hesitating only briefly before pressing my lips to his. The kiss was gentle, mindful of his injuries, but the connection it forged was anything but fragile. When I pulled back, his eyes had darkened, and his hand had moved to cup my face. Stay with me, he said softly. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. I'll stay, I promised, realizing as I spoke that it was the truth. Somewhere amid the danger and deception, the fear and revelation, I had begun to see beyond the armor he wore to the man beneath. And that man, complicated, dangerous, but capable of surprising tenderness, was someone I wanted to know better. 6 months later, Lily completed her treatment in Switzerland, her cancer in full remission. She came to live with us at the villa, while she regained her strength, filling the once austere halls with her laughter and irrepressible spirit. You know, she told me one evening, as we sat in the garden watching Vittorio take a business call at a distance, his free hand absently petting the rescue dog that had become his unlikely shadow. When you first told me you'd married him to save me, I thought you'd made the ultimate sacrifice. And now? I asked, smiling as Vittorio shot us a questioning look, sensing we were talking about him. Now I think maybe I did you a favor, she teased, then grew serious. He would die for you, Lena. Not many people find that kind of love. I watched as Vittorio concluded his call and walked toward us, his face relaxing from business mode into the private smile he reserved for family. Our beginning may have been rooted in danger and necessity, but what had grown from that unlikely soil was something rare and precious, a love forged in fire, tested by darkness, and ultimately stronger for having survived both. He wasn't perfect. Neither was I. The world we inhabited still had its shadows, its dangers, its compromises. But we faced them together, eyes open, choosing each other every day, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.